start this juggling act here. Okay. So taking from a municipality level and taking you right up to the broad scale of Southern Africa, I'm going to share with you and reflect on some of the experiences that we've had in communicating climate information to decision makers within Southern Africa. So there's a need to effectively communicate climate information to end users in order to ensure resilient development. And this has been highlighted by the SADC Secretariat themselves, and where they've called for improved planning under climate change and access to the information required for this planning. And more recently, at the Africa Climate Change Conference in 2013, as part of their statement, they say improved and more effective communication between climate science and policy. And this work I presented at this conference, and was really privileged to receive the award for the Best Poster Prize. So they really emphasized the whole communication of climate change information in our arena. So this is the experiences I'm presenting here, part of a USAID project which aimed to build capacity around climate change within the SADC member states. And there's two key outputs of this project. Firstly, there was a handbook, and secondly, using that handbook as part of in-country training courses and capacity building. So firstly, the aim of the handbook was to equip decision makers in Southern Africa with up-to-date information appropriate for country-level planning on the impact and risk of climate change and variability. I do have copies of this handbook available here at the back of the room, so you're more than welcome to take copies. So this handbook was innovative in a number of ways. We had a multidisciplinary team that came together and looked at, firstly, looking backwards at observations of historical change. How have things changed in Southern Africa in the past? Then combining both statistical and dynamical downscaled climate change projections. Then looking at the impacts within a social adaptive arena and a vulnerability context. And then looking at potential responses linked to the opportunities for climate finance. And we used a range of case studies across the region which drew together some of the ways in which climate change is being successfully managed in the region. As part of this process, we used a science communicator, which was actually also very unique in the sense she worked with us throughout the entire process. And then because Mozambique was one of our focus countries, we also translated this handbook into Portuguese as well. So this is just a word cloud to give you some of the aspects that were brought together into this handbook. So we try to bring together all of the key aspects of climate risk in Southern Africa. So a key task of this was trying to bring together working messages so that governments can start seeing what to expect from climate change and how can they begin to deal with it. Often, a lot of the times, the governments are bombarded by all these different climate change projections from all these different models, saying different things, having different biases. So can we actually start pulling all of those projections together and start putting together working messages? Just an example, some of the working messages. Obviously, temperatures is an easy working message to put together. Rainfall was a little bit more complicated, but there was some agreement between the statistical and the dynamical downscalings, and those are just some of the examples. And in the handbook, we put together a table showing where they actually agreed and disagreed, and as well the reasons why they did or didn't. So some of the key lessons learned as part of this process is, firstly, the use of a professional science communicator was invaluable. She allowed us as a scientist to focus quite a bit more on our science, but also taught us how to take it and translate it in an effective way into the handbook. And this enabled a much user-friendly publication, and which actually has made the climate science more accessible because it's easier to read, easier to engage with. And the handbook, we think, is the first step in making this climate science more accessible to decision makers. And I'll discuss later some of the impacts of how this, because it's more accessible, it's been easier to uptake in some of the countries. So then move on to the training courses. Just some pictures of the training courses that we held. We held a 3-day training course in Namibia, Zambia, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. And the content was based on the core chapters of the handbook, but also based on a user needs assessment, which was conducted in each of the countries prior to the workshops. We targeted government departments, so the movers and shakers. That was our target. We did have quite a bit of media coverage. We had media there, try and link more with the outside communities, not only with decision makers. And we also linked with regional organizations as well, who facilitated a lot of getting the people there and facilitating the workshop as well from local experiences, presentations from key stakeholders. And there's just some examples of some of the media coverage that we had during our workshops there. So I just want to spend some time on the lessons learned from doing the training courses in Southern Africa. It's very, very important to budget a lot of time to engage with the stakeholders in the country and understand what their needs are, what the information is, so that the training is driven by the information required. So the needs assessment enabled us to adapt the handbook for each of the national contexts. For some of the regions, like Mozambique, they wanted us to focus in the courses a lot on linking climate change adaptation and disaster risk management. It's because those two are run very parallel to each other, but a lot of their strategies don't overlap. And yet in Zimbabwe, they wanted us to focus a lot of the sessions on how do we access climate finance, what are the best ways of managing climate finance. And then this helped us develop the training material. And what we learned here is, you need quite a wide range of techniques available to you in order to effectively communicate the information. And then just to go back here, a key point is communication alone doesn't lead to action. So it's very important to monitor and evaluate and track the uptake of the information for the stakeholders. A key challenge that we faced was getting the right people to attend. First of all, you need to incentivize the government to attend the workshops. In Zambia, the workshop was an absolute failure because not one single person from government attended. It was held in Lusaka, but in order for the people to attend, they wanted a daily S&T and accommodation paid, despite the fact that the offices were down the road. And also, in a lot of cases, there's overlapping initiatives in the country as well. So people might have meetings at the same time, 3 days might be a bit long. So it's a real challenge to get the right people to attend. And then this work has actually helped serve some of the information needs within Southern Africa. Firstly, it helps support SADC level engagement through the climate change think tank and the climate change strategy as well. And then when we were running these courses, they were running parallel to the national climate change policy developments by the country. And what we found from the stakeholders, they found it very useful that this information actually went into the development of their climate change policies. So just in terms of the way forward, improved communication is required, and it needs to be driven by user needs assessments. It is absolutely important. And this need for communication is again emphasized in a newly launched Climate Change Services Adaptation Program for Africa, which is UMO program. And then different funding streams supporting capacity building in SADC need to align better. Like I said, a lot of the necessary stakeholders are not at your training because there's so many parallel initiatives happening at the same time. And then linked to that, it was very difficult for us, even though we had local partners, it was very difficult for us to engage with the local governments, the national governments, in order to get them to the workshops. So what we would advise is a focal point in the country, not necessarily just from an NGO or from a partner, but part of your own team, to actually be based in the country to coordinate the engagement, sending physical invitations to the people, engaging them, knowing their faces, that kind of thing. And then the importance of tracking the uptake of climate change information. But as in this project, our funding has come to an end, and we're quite restricted in this process right now of tracking the uptake of information. But we'll hopefully track that through the national policies that will be in place. Thank you.